Aboard the Aurora 13, a research station orbiting the colossal Dyson sphere surrounding Tau Ceti, Dr. Valen Rhodes felt the weight of an impending crisis. A single jarring alert echoed through the metallic corridors, shattering the sterile calm of the facility. Warning, temporal anomaly detected. Even as the words flashed before him, Valen's mind raced, grappling with the implications of such a breach. What had they unleashed in their fervent pursuit of knowledge? For years, the Dyson Sphere project had been humanity's crowning achievement, a magnificent construct designed to harvest infinite stellar energy. This engineering marvel, a series of plates orbiting a sun-like star, served as an epicenter for profound advancements in quantum physics, but it was here, on the Aurora 13, that Valen had dared to push the boundaries of reality itself. He had gathered a team of the brightest minds from cities like Zephyr Heights and Altair Bay, each member committed to the audacious goal of traversing parallel dimensions for sustainable energy solutions. Yet, in their quest, they had overlooked one crucial detail: the fragility of the very fabric of reality they sought to manipulate. Now, as he stared at the security feeds, dread settled deep in his bones. The screens displayed corridors that twisted into infinity, crew members appearing in duplicates, their expressions a mix of confusion and fear. In the dark recesses of the footage, shadows flickered, shadows that should not exist. It was as if the station itself was a living entity, breathing and warping under the strain of its own ambition. Valen's heart raced, memories of his childhood in the quiet town of Nova Vesper flooding back. He had always been drawn to the mysteries of the universe, the questions that kept him awake at night. But this was a nightmare he could never have anticipated. The very laws of physics seemed to unravel, and with each passing moment, the station drifted further from the realm of the known. The first signs of conflict had emerged subtly at first. A crew member, Janice Kurek, had entered the lab to conduct routine tests, but had not returned. Hours later, she reappeared, her eyes vacant and her words a jumble of incoherence. "I saw them," she whispered, shaking uncontrollably. Valen had dismissed her fears as stress-induced hallucinations, a consequence of weeks spent in isolation. But with each subsequent disappearance, the tension among the remaining crew sharpened like a knife's edge. As Valen walked through the dimly lit halls, the air grew thick with an unsettling energy, the walls themselves seeming to pulse with unspoken tension. He could feel their eyes upon him, each crew member grappling with their own fears, their own secrets. The station, with its cold metallic surfaces and flickering lights, was no longer just a backdrop. It had become a catalyst for their collective dread, an ever-watchful audience to their unraveling sanity. But it was not just the station that haunted them. Valen's own past loomed large, a specter that refused to fade. He recalled the day he lost his brother in a failed experiment, an incident that haunted him like a ghost, a regret that had driven him to this relentless pursuit of understanding. Now, as the boundaries of reality frayed, he couldn't shake the feeling that the past was reaching out, intertwining with the shadows that lurked just beyond the veil. And then, as the lights flickered ominously, something inexplicable happened. A cold rush of air swept through the corridor, carrying with it the faint echo of laughter, childlike, innocent, but utterly out of place in the sterile confines of the Aurora 13. The crew exchanged frightened glances, and Valen knew then that they were not alone. Something was watching, something that had slipped through the cracks of their reality. The urgency to act surged within him, propelling him forward into the unknown. As Dr. Valen Rhodes pressed deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of the Aurora 13, the unsettling atmosphere thickened, wrapping around him like a shroud. Just behind him, the flickering lights illuminated the faces of his crew, each one a mask of anxiety, mirroring the chaos that churned in his own mind. He was their leader, the visionary who had lured them into this project. And now, he felt, their collective apprehension weighing heavily upon his shoulders. In the central control room, he found his second-in-command, Dr. Mira Chen, hunched over a console, fingers flying across the interface. Her normally composed demeanor was shattered, replaced by a wild intensity. "Valen, you need to see this," she shouted, her voice barely masking the tremor of fear. He approached, peering at the screen as it displayed incomprehensible data streams and readings that fluctuated erratically. "The temporal anomaly is increasing in intensity." "I've never seen anything like it," Mira said, her eyes wide. "If we don't stabilize it, we risk a full dimensional collapse." "Stabilize it? How?" Valen replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "We barely understand the mechanisms we're dealing with, and now we're expected to reverse engineer the chaos we've caused?" Mira's gaze flickered to the side, her expression haunted. "We might have to shut down the main reactor to contain the anomaly, but that would mean losing all power. We could be trapped here, vulnerable to whatever is out there." As they spoke, a sudden crash echoed from the adjacent lab. Valen's heart raced. "What was that?" he demanded, instinctively moving toward the sound. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a scene that sent chills down his spine. Inside, Janice Correct stood, her figure illuminated by the eerie glow of malfunctioning equipment. She was backed against a wall, eyes wide as she clutched a broken panel, the remnants of the machinery lying scattered around her. "They're here! They're coming!" she screamed, her voice cracking with terror. "Janice, who's coming?" Valen asked, his tone steady, though his heart raced. "The shadows! They're not just manifestations, they're alive," she stammered, glancing nervously toward the darkened corners of the room as though expecting something to leap out at her. Mira stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "You need to breathe, Janice. Focus on me. We're going to get you out of here." But Janice shook her head violently, her eyes darting. "You don't understand. They're us, but not us. They're the crew that didn't make it back." Valen felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "What do you mean?" Just then, a flicker of movement caught his eye, a shadow flitting past the doorway, too quick and too deliberate to be a trick of the light. His instinct screamed at him to run, but he couldn't abandon Janice like this. "Stay close to me," Valen ordered, stepping toward her. "We're getting you out of here. Mira, help me." But as they moved to grasp Janice's arms, the lights flickered again, and a low hum resonated through the room. The atmosphere shifted, thickening with an unseen pressure. Valen felt a sudden disorientation, as if the very air had become viscous, dragging him down. "Valen!" Mira shouted, reaching for him, but he felt himself pulled backward, a powerful force tugging at him from the shadows. In that moment, the full weight of their situation crashed down on him. This was no longer just a scientific endeavor, it was a battle for survival against an incomprehensible force. Each choice they made now held the potential to alter their fate, threading between dimensions that twisted and turned like the very fabric of their existence. "Hold on," he yelled, but the shadows coalesced around him, and he knew deep down that the real fight was only just beginning. As they grappled with the unknown, the dimensional rift pulsed ominously, a reminder that time was slipping away. They were not merely researchers anymore. They were prey in a game that was far beyond their understanding. And as Valen faced the encroaching darkness, he understood that the true conflict lay not just in the external forces threatening them, but in the very depths of their own minds. Haunted by the choices they had made, as the shadows writhed around Dr. Valen Rhodes, he felt a disorienting sensation, as though time itself was unraveling. The room twisted, the walls bending inward, and he could hear the whispers of his crew, echoes of their fears, their regrets. It was as if the darkness was dredging up memories long buried, forcing them to confront the demons they had tried so hard to escape. "Valen, focus!" Mira shouted, her voice piercing through the haze. But even her determination wavered as the shadows began to take shape, coalescing into distorted figures that bore haunting resemblances to the crew members who had perished during the initial experiments. Faces twisted in anguish, eyes filled with a knowing dread, they floated just beyond the reach of reality. "Janice," Mira murmured, stepping back in horror, "what did you mean by 'they're us'?" In that moment, Janice's expression shifted from terror to a strange calm, as if the shadows were not just manifestations of fear, but reflections of a deeper truth. "They know what we did," Janice whispered, her gaze unfocused. "They know about the breach, about the lives we sacrificed for our ambition." Valen's heart hammered in his chest. The memories of the first experiment rushed back, the rushing energy, the thrill of discovery, and the moment when the anomaly had spiraled out of control, costing them 3 crew members. They had been warned, but ambition had blinded them. "Is this punishment?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Are we being judged for our choices?" Suddenly, a wave of recognition washed over him. Valen realized that these shadows were not merely echoes of the past. They were manifestations of their very own guilt and responsibility. Each figure represented a moment he had tried to forget, a decision that had led them to this precipice. Mira's eyes widened as if she too had come to a realization. "We thought we could control it, Valen. We thought we were gods of our own making," she said, her voice trembling. "But we opened a door we shouldn't have, and now they're here to reclaim what we took." The shadows surged forward, and Valen felt a surge of panic. He clutched Janice's arm, forcing her to face him. "We have to confront this together, not just run. We have to own up to our past." But the shadows began to swirl with greater intensity, and Valen's vision blurred. Memories flooded back, his childhood, a fraught relationship with his father, the pressure to succeed that had driven him to this point. He recalled the day his father had warned him against ambition, against pushing boundaries. "You're playing with fire, Valen," he had said. "One day, it will consume you." With that memory surfaced a deep-seated fear. Was he truly mad? Or was this some horrific manifestation of his own failures? The question gnawed at him, deeper than any darkness. "Valen!" Mira's voice broke through again, but it sounded distant, muffled. "We can't let them take you." But the shadows were closing in, and Valen felt himself slipping, not just into darkness, but into the very depths of his own psyche. The crew's screams echoed around him, merging with the whispers of regret and the shadowy faces that loomed closer. As he struggled against the pull of the shadows, he realized they were not just echoes of the past, but voices of the future, warnings of what could become if he didn't act. Despair clawed at him as he faced the truth. They were not merely fighting for survival, they were battling the very essence of their choices. And as the darkness threatened to consume him whole, a sudden surge of energy erupted from the reactor, jolting the room. The anomaly pulsed violently, and in that moment, a realization struck Valen like lightning. Perhaps the key to their escape lay not in fighting the shadows, but in understanding them. "Fight back!" he screamed, his voice rising above the chaos. "We need to confront them, not flee." But as the shadows writhed, he wondered if they truly could, or if the darkness would claim them all. As the shadows closed in, Valen felt the weight of his crew's despair pressing down on him. The air crackled with energy, and the whispers of the past transformed into a cacophony of anguished cries. Each shadowy figure reached out, fingers stretching towards him like tendrils of a dark storm, promising to drag him into the abyss of his own failures. "Valen!" Mira's voice rang out, fierce and unwavering amid the chaos. She stepped forward, her determination igniting a flicker of hope within him. "We can't let them take you. We can confront this together." But Janice, still gripped by the shadows, looked torn. "What if we can't? What if this is just our reckoning?" She gasped, her eyes darting between Valen and the encroaching darkness. "No!" Valen shouted, shaking her arm to draw her focus. "We can't give in to despair. We are not their prisoners. We are the architects of our fate." The shadows recoiled slightly, as if his words had struck a nerve. He could feel the energy from the reactor pulsating, an echo of the power that had once fueled their ambitions. It was a reminder that they were not powerless. They had choices, even now. With newfound resolve, Valen turned to face the figures, their faces contorted in grief and rage. "You are not my past," he declared, his voice rising above the din. "You are the consequences of my actions, but I will not let fear define me. I will confront you." The shadows writhed, as if they were alive, their forms flickering between sorrow and anger. One figure stepped forward, an image of a young crew member lost during the experiment, eyes wide with accusation. "You abandoned us. You thought you could control the impossible." Valen felt the weight of the accusation, a dagger piercing his heart. "No, we believed in progress, in discovery. But I see now that we were blind." His voice broke, but he pressed on. "I was blinded by ambition, but I will not turn my back on you. I acknowledge my failures." Mira and Janice stepped closer, their hands gripping each other's tightly, drawing strength from one another. "We're here too," Mira shouted, joining Valen's declaration. "We failed you, but we will not forget. We will atone." The shadows surged forward, a tempest of swirling darkness, but Valen stood firm, flanked by his crew. The energy from the reactor pulsed in rhythm with their resolve, creating a barrier against the encroaching despair. In that pivotal moment, Valen reached deep within himself, channeling the pain and regret he had tried to bury. "We face you, not with fear but with understanding. You are part of us, and we will honor your memory by choosing a different path." The shadows hesitated, a flicker of recognition passing through their forms. Valen felt a shift, a crack in the overwhelming darkness that had threatened to consume them. Hope flickered in the stagnant air, and he knew they had touched upon something profound. But even as the shadows began to waver, a surge of energy erupted from the reactor, overwhelming the senses. It was then that Valen understood. The battle was far from over. The ultimate reckoning awaited them, and what lay ahead would test not only their resolve, but the very fabric of their humanity. As the shadows began to recede, a blinding light erupted from the reactor, enveloping Valen and his crew. The energy surged, intertwining with their forms, and for a fleeting moment they felt the weight of the past lift. Yet, as the brightness dimmed, they could see the toll exacted upon them. Valen staggered back, his breath ragged, and his heart raced with the remnants of fear and bravery. His clothes were singed and a searing pain radiated from a deep gash on his arm, an injury sustained in their fight against the shadows. Yet, as he glanced at Mira and Janice, he found a strange comfort in their presence. They too bore scars, not just physical but emotional, echoes of the torment they had confronted together. Mira's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and her expression was a mix of relief and loss. "We did it," she breathed, though the shadows of grief still haunted her gaze. "But at what cost?" Janice knelt, examining the remnants of the shadows, now dissipating into wisps of smoke. "We've confronted our past, but I can still feel it lurking just out of reach." Her voice trembled, the weight of unspoken fears hanging heavily between them. Valen nodded, understanding the lingering uncertainty. "This isn't over," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "We may have quelled the immediate threat, but there are questions that remain unanswered. We need to understand what truly happened with the reactor." As the last remnants of darkness faded, the room fell eerily silent. The reactor, though still humming faintly, seemed to pulse with a different energy, a mix of power and sorrow. Valen could sense it was more than a mere machine. It was a vessel holding the memories of those lost, and perhaps even a gateway to something greater. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. In the corner of the room, a shadow lingered longer than the others, its shape distinct, as if it was trying to form a coherent figure. Valen stepped forward, heart pounding, but as he reached out, it dissipated into a swirl of light, leaving behind an unsettling sense of unfinished business. "What was that?" Mira whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I don't know," Valen admitted, his brow furrowing. "But I have the feeling it's a clue. There's something more at play here." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm blaring from the console. Janice rushed to the control panel, her fingers flying over the buttons. "The reactor's output is spiking. It's unstable." Valen's heart sank. "We need to stabilize it. If it explodes, there will be no coming back from that." As they scrambled to contain the reactor, Valen felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced their demons, but the journey was far from over. The shadows may have retreated, but new mysteries loomed on the horizon. With the reactor stabilized, they stepped back, catching their breath. Yet the air felt charged, electric with possibilities. Valen looked at his crew, their faces marked by fatigue, but also determination. "We need to investigate what we've unleashed. There are still truths to uncover." Mira nodded, her eyes resolute. "Together we'll face whatever comes next." As they prepared to leave the chamber, Valen couldn't shake the feeling that their confrontation had only scratched the surface of a much deeper mystery. The shadows might have retreated, but their echoes lingered, hinting at the trials yet to come. And as Valen turned away from the reactor, he couldn't help but feel that the whispers of the past were not finished with him yet. The journey ahead would demand more than they had given, but he knew they would face it together, come what may. As Valen, Mira, and Janice stepped away from the reactor, a sudden tremor rippled through the chamber. The air thickened, charged, with a strange energy that seemed to swirl around them, pulling at the very fabric of their reality. Valen's heart raced as he felt an inexplicable force tugging at his consciousness, as though the world around him was beginning to unravel. "No, not now," he shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the rising hum of the reactor, which transformed into a deafening roar. In an instant, the room flickered, and time itself began to warp. The shadows they had fought against twisted and coiled, morphing into a swirling vortex of light and darkness. Valen grasped Mira's hand tightly, his eyes wide with fear. "We have to hold on." But as the vortex intensified, he felt reality slipping away from him, the moments of their victory dissolving into a chaotic loop. The reactor's power surged, forcing them into a temporal rift that left no room for escape. With a final blinding flash, Valen found himself alone in an endless expanse, a loop of moments repeating before him, faces of Mira and Janice, echoes of their laughter and pain intertwined with the shadows. He was trapped in a relentless cycle, unable to move forward or back, forever tethered to the memories of the battle they had fought together. A sense of despair enveloped him. He had confronted his past, but now the past was all he had, and he was powerless to change it. The shadows of his choices loomed large, and he realized with horror that he would never escape this reality, destined to relive the same moments, the same pain, without resolution. As the echoes of his crew faded into the distance, Valen's voice trembled in the void, a whisper lost to the winds of time. "Mira, Janice." And with that, he was left to face the endless shadows of his own making, a victim of time, forever bound to the cycle of what once was. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Share with your friends so they can also embark on this mystery-filled adventure. Leave a comment below telling us your favorite part or what kind of ending you'd like to see in a future story.